It's not a rap battle, but the Jaguars have their own big three. I'll tell you about Boselli, Gladstone, and Coen, and some things that you might have wrong on this edition of Locked On Jaguar.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir, everybody. It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast that you can find wherever you get your podcast. Just make sure you tap in each and every day so you do not miss an episode of the show. Whether you watch or listen, we will be there. All right, and today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Hello to the everydayers and hi to the newcomers as well. You can be an everydayer. Just come back. I'll give you a reason to come back, and I'll start right now. Here in segment 3, well, here on the day show, we're going to talk about the big three. I'm talking about the EVP, the GM, and the coach. And some things you might have wrong. I'll go over Tony Boselli's impact in segment number 3. In the middle of the show, Coen might be tougher than you think. And I'll give you some reasons and an example already of why he's tough in kind of a different way. And Gladstone is a leader, not boy wonder. I think sometimes we get these ideas of who people are based on their public persona, based on what we think about the first impression that we get from guys, the humility. It's very, very easy to fall into this trap that when these guys get career-defining employment and get these jobs, and they come out with their parents and their families, and they tell you a little bit about their history, and they go through the whole spiel about what they want to accomplish here and how this is a dream come true. You are literally seeing guys who aren't on the field, at least anymore in the terms of Tony Boselli. It's almost like a guy getting drafted for the first time. And he comes up and he smiles, and hugs the commissioner. And then he flies to his respective city. And what happens then is he meets everybody. He's happy to get started. He's smiling. They get a shoe deal. They get a beverage deal. And we forget they're gladiators, right? We forget they are big, mean, nasty football players. Everybody, when they get drafted, just think about all the guys that have ever gotten disciplined in the league, all of the guys that I'll give you a perfect example, and I don't want no smoke with it, but it's AB, Antonio Brown. I remember seeing Antonio Brown in a suit, sitting there on first take, smiling from ear to ear, being just as polite as he could. I'm not saying he ain't nice now, but I know the perception of him isn't that he's not nice, and he certainly played with a big edge, right? I think sometimes when coaches get jobs, we forget that this is a cutthroat business. While they are not on the field hitting people, they do have to make tough choices. They have to have a lot of thick skin to sit there and deal with people like me and other people that are going to ask them questions all the time, to be second guessed constantly about every little thing that they do. And they're leading the 53, the practice squad, all of these guys are those gladiators that I talked about, right? So sometimes you get caught up thinking that these guys don't have to have a semblance or some form of toughness. I beg to differ. They absolutely do. James Gladstone got hired here as the general manager, and they talk about alignment. They talk about everybody lining up. They talk about everybody being, in one step, in lockstep, and the responsibilities. And then you see the videos of when they sign free agents and they're making this and doing all the gestures and they're throwing the ball and they're high-fiving and they're hugging. Don't get it twisted about JG. You don't get to where he is by being Mr. Rogers. You don't get to where he is just by being smart. You have to have fortitude. You have to get to anything or to be someone who is in the position that he's in, to have the authority that he has. Oh, no, you got to be a tough cookie, man. You just don't get to that point without being exactly that, because like I said, it is a cutthroat business. And I know we want to talk about Les Snead and how Les Snead is a mentor to him and all of the nice things that everybody says. But let me explain something to you. On the way from a high school coach all the way to the general manager position, do you know how many people he ran into that did not want him to be successful because he was going to pass them by? Liam Cohen said something yesterday that sparked me to do this podcast. And that is, he was talking, I believe it was to Jaguars.com. At least I saw it there. I saw an interview that JP Shadrick, a little clip where he talked, Liam Cohen spoke of James Gladstone. And he said, look, we aren't buddies. We weren't buddies in LA when I first got there. We weren't buddies. We were professionals. And initially, Gladstone's job was to handle unrestricted free agency. And Liam was basically, the way he described it was, he was absolutely blown away about how smart this guy was, about how much he knew about each player, about, I suspect, about how intentional and how sure he was. Coen did say that James got along with everybody in all walks of life and was a great communicator. And I think being a great communicator, sometimes people get that twisted, being Mr. Nice Guy. That is not true. I think I'm a good communicator, and half the people I have met in my entire life have thought I was one of the meanest people they've ever met in their entire life. I don't think so, but it comes with the territory. You know how hard it has to be to call somebody in, tell them they're not good enough? Do you know how hard it has to be, or do you know how hard you have to be deadly honest with somebody who's trying to live out their dreams, and you have to tell them that if they're going to do it, they're going to do it somewhere else? You're not talking to a child. You're talking to gladiators. At some point, somebody had that conversation with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Somebody had that conversation with Goldberg. Somebody had that conversation with a whole bunch of people that a whole lot of people think are tough guys, and you got to look them in the eye, and they have to be able to respect you when you say it. Now, I know you say, well, Wig, man, you got security. They ain't going to do nothing. They ain't going to ruin their career. Ain't nobody going to slap you. Since when does that stop somebody from being a coward? It doesn't. You have to be tough if you are making tough, hard decisions that affect people's livelihoods, that affect an organization that's going to have $500,000 at the very minimum, or half a million people at the very minimum telling you that you suck at your job. To tell someone that they can't continue on working for you, that the money that they had, you're not going to give it to them. Or how about this one? You think those agents are easy people to negotiate with? I remember a music executive, Suge Knight. He's in prison right now for a whole bunch of shenanigans. He was on Death Row Records that had Tupac and all of these dudes that were involved in East Coast, West Coast beef back in the 90s. Suge Knight says, if y'all think I'm tough, you ain't never been in a room with Clive Davis. Clive Davis is about 5'8" and an older guy. He says, you think I'm hard? It takes a guy like me to be in there with Clive Davis. If you think I'm hard, Puffy ain't no angel. And we now see, I ain't calling nobody guilty, that Puffy probably wasn't no angel. We have to make sure we don't judge a book by its cover. I think James Gladstone, to get to where he is, smart communicator, but I also think he's tough. Why am I saying this? Because he's going to have to make a lot of tough decisions and have a lot of thick skin to deal with fans, to deal with media, and to deal with Shai, who is putting all of this trust in him. Don't think Mr. Rogers is sitting over there just because he's a nice dude talking about he putting his kids in school. Oh, no. You need someone that's going to outsmart Howie Roseman at least some of the time. You need someone that's going to stand up to Brad Holmes if they have to make a trade. You need someone that's going to have to be measured enough to be able to talk to Shad, talk to the media, talk to coaches, and talk to players on a daily basis. And I think you got one. This ain't Mr. Rogers. He ain't no boy wonder. He's a tough dude that got to where he is because not only is he all of these other things that we think, but he's also a tough, thin-skinned individual. I'm going to talk more about Liam Cohen and how his smile and his way of going about business might trick you a little bit. But then I'm going to remind you of something that he said, not necessarily to the camera, but that was caught on camera, and then an action that they took weeks later that shows you he ain't no pushover either. Because in this business, when you're dealing with these gladiators, you need someone that's going to be willing to do the hard things and be able to stand tall on those decisions. I'll talk about all of that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Game Time. Listen, imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. And there's a lot of people in this area that will be watching the college basketball tournament this weekend, knowing that their favorite team and the team that they're rooted for their entire life has a chance to do something special. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time Picks is a curation process that makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and even more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's Locked On NFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Segment 2 here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We're going to talk about Liam Cohen now. We talked about James Gladstone and some of the touchy-feely, nice things that we've all felt with the new regime change, and the big three is what I want to call them. We're going to get to the second part of that big three, and that is Liam Cohen. Liam Cohen, to me, is a very well-spoken guy, comes across a little bit like all shucks, has this look about him like Richie Cunningham grew up. And I might date myself with this, but Richie Cunningham was on the show Happy Days. In fact, these are some happy days around here in Jacksonville because they made all of the changes that everybody wants, and everybody's all giddy about the prospects of a different kind of future that's way different from the past, current, and some past that's not so recent, that the Jaguars, who haven't been very good, that people think is going to change. That stuff doesn't come with just everybody being all nice and hugging and cooking marshmallows together. There's a level of toughness to that. I'm going to say this real quick. When Urban Meyer was here, before him it was Doug Marrone, they were outwardly tough. One of them was incompetent, and the other one just, he just didn't get it done. I feel let you figure out who I'm talking about, right? Then you get Liam Cohen coming in here, and he's just a nice guy, and everybody thinks, man, I keep hearing people go, oh, man, but the two things that I'm hearing fans and some folks in the barbershop atmosphere maybe have a little trepidation about are this. Is there a grown man in the room? I'll talk about him in segment 3. Yeah, they're all grown. These dudes ain't. I know y'all think you're looking at them like they're 25, but they're not. They're in their 30s, late 30s, early to mid 40s. Maybe with Boselli, he's getting close to pushing 50. Shout out to Tony if I put some age on you that you don't have, my bad. But I suspect that you're somewhere around late 40s. Came out in 1996, 97, got drafted. Was probably 21 years old. I do my Duval County school math, and I'm sitting there saying, okay, he's 47, 48. I ain't Googling it because it's not really that important as long as he's somewhere in that area. But you get my point. But here's the thing I want to tell you about Liam Cohen. Liam Cohen, after his initial press conference, when he shook hands with players and it was caught on camera and audio, looked at Christian Kirk and said, "Hey, man." And I'll paraphrase here. He kind of mumbled like he knew that somebody was very familiar with him. It turns out, I believe it was Coach Whipple, who's going to be on the offensive staff here. It's someone that Liam. And hey, man, I know him, and good guy. Hit him on the shoulder, and yeah, they did more than just the standard dap. They went in with the dap, and chest bumped and all of that. And then he kind of shook Gabe Davis's hand, and everybody online was like, "Poor Gabe, poor Gabe." And then they thought, because he said that Trevor will have some input and on these things, and they know that Trevor's cool with Kirk and Trevor's cool with Evan Ingram. And every time I suggested that both of those guys were in trouble, people said, "Oh, nah, man, he shook his hand and he said Trevor's gonna have input. He's not getting rid of Trevor's buddies." Okay, check this out. A few weeks later, after Coach Whipple actually got put on staff, guess who was let go? Both of them. "Hey, man, yeah, we ain't gonna." I don't know if it went like this, but I'm only guessing it was probably like, "Yeah, we need you to take a pay cut." Basically, we didn't sign you to that deal, and they didn't say this. This is just me. We needed you to take a little bit of a pay cut, which means that your production doesn't match that salary. And you probably don't really even fit what we do here. We think we can actually get better. Maybe you need to you don't want to take a pay cut? All right, hey, man, we're going to have to let you go. If you don't think that is a tough thing to do in this business, you're wrong. I talked to Darryl Green, I would say 7 or 8 years ago. He was in town, and he was a guest speaker at an event that I hosted for a local college here, Edward Waters. And I was doing radio, so he came in earlier to promote it on the radio. And I had to inform Green that he was like one of my 5 favorite players of all time, because he played for the team that I grew up rooting for in Washington as a kid. I went to the parade when they won the Super Bowl in like 1981, 82. I was there. They let us all out of school, right? Lived and died with Darryl Green. Top 7, top 8 cornerback of all time. Darryl Green is a devout Christian who's never said a curse word in his life. He told me that, and I absolutely believe him. He said he's never drank alcohol in his life. He told me that, and I absolutely believe him. I believe any man that runs a 4.5 40 at 50 years old. I also believe any man that when he's 38, you whooped the Champ Bailey in a 50-yard dash, and Champ was 24 years old and one of the fastest players in the league. And Darryl Green told me, when I asked him about Joe Gibbs, another devout Christian, Hall of Fame coach, who's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame in NASCAR too, because he's been very, very successful. And one of the most all-shucks people you'll ever mention. And something told me, based on my military service, that Joe Gibbs was probably not as nice as I thought he was. Darryl Green said, "No, he's a good man, but don't get it twisted. He would get on you in a heartbeat if you weren't doing what you were supposed to do." He didn't use terrible language, but man, Darryl Green basically told me you just didn't want to disappoint him. And if you did, you knew it. There's a certain toughness that very soft-spoken people have. If you ever saw Tom Coughlin at a J Fund event or around his children, Tom Coughlin was as mild and as meek and as nice as ever. If you ever bumped into Tom Coughlin, the coach or the senior executive vice president, either on the practice field, in a press conference, or in that building, like I did when I was on the black mat when I wasn't supposed to be. Well, I was supposed to be, but he didn't know it. "Hey, coach, how you doing?" "Fine. What are you doing here? Why are you here?" "You're not supposed to." "Oh, I was with Marcus Pollard. Yeah, he went in his office to answer the phone." And Marcus gave him thumbs up. Yeah, you cool. Yeah, okay, yeah. Grown man. I got grown kids, man. This dude talking to me like that. But that's his job. That's his responsibility. Make no mistake about it. Somebody hits that quarterback late, Trevor Lawrence late. Unlike Doug Peterson, I think Liam Cohen's going to rip that headset off and give that official a whole bunch of something that he ain't want. I think when a player sloughs and doesn't do the things that he's supposed to do, oh, don't think for a minute your coach, just because he's nice and he smiles and talks about his family and his dad, that he won't sit there and be like, nah, bro, look, you got to tighten up or we're going to put somebody else in this game. This is what I need from you, and you got to do it. The reason why I'm bringing that up, because it is absolutely necessary when you're dealing with those gladiators. You got to have some toughness, but there's a way you can do toughness. You can do it the Dan Campbell, Mike Tomlin way, or you can do it another way, like Joe Gibbs or Pete Carroll. There's just two ways you can do it. Some of y'all are married. Y'all know what I mean. If your wife don't yell at you, but she gives you the silent treatment, which one of them you like the most? When you know you're wrong, both of them sting a little bit, don't they? Don't y'all sit here and start thinking that your GM is just some boy wonder and that your head coach is just some dude that loves to call plays and just gets along with everybody. And that means that y'all going to have this old soft football team that goes on the field. Why do I believe that? Because the first thing he said football-wise is we need to run the ball. It's a violent game. We need to run the ball. We need to be physical. We need to make people feel us, and we need to make them see us when we break the huddle. Now, come on, man. Soft people don't do that kind of stuff. They just say it in a very, very nice way. I'll tell you somebody else who ain't soft. Tony Boselli. Tony used to have prayer meetings in Marsh Landing when he was a player, when he was in his 20s, right? He didn't play like that. He's the same dude that told Jason Taylor at the end of the third quarter, come on down here on the other field. Let me give you some more of this medicine. That's Hall of Famer Jason Taylor. You damn right Tony Boselli was nasty. And I think that characteristic will also help him as the executive vice president of this team. And I'll get to that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Let's talk about Big Bo, the EVP. There is something to be said about a player who played the game the way Tony played it. There's something to be said about, and I know a lot about this. Sometimes when you hear a guy talking, he sounds like he knows it all. Yeah, I've heard that about me before. I've heard it about Tony before. Tony Boselli is the type of person, when you have a conversation with him, he'll joke with you, he'll smile. But you got to get to the point. And I think as a person who has the characteristics that he has, if y'all heard him on Jaguars.com, him and Pete Prisco going back and forth, if you heard him on the radio broadcast, you hear him on the drill on 1010XL, my former radio station, Tony will go in on it, man. Tony will scrap with you now, and you can tell that's the kind of player he was, a former two-star recruit that ended up being the first player ever chosen, second player overall chosen in the NFL draft, and a Hall of Famer. And everybody who played against him said he was nasty, man. Absolutely nasty. You see, there's a way you got to turn it on and turn it off. I call it something like your grandfather. Grandfather's a tough man that don't play the radio. You make noise in church and he'll turn around and just give you the eye. Old deacon. It's like Hank Aaron. People thought Hank Aaron was just this really, really nice guy. But Hank Aaron was a tough Southern man who came up in the civil rights era, had a lot of stuff going on when he even broke Babe Ruth's record, and he had to be tough. Toughness has a different face. You can't really identify it by, it's not a scowl. It's not a look. It's how you act. It's how you carry yourself. It's the evidence that when you're doing something big, like playing football against the likes of John Randall and Bruce Smith, that you can go out and have it in you. And when you're like that and you're in charge of helping to build this roster, you're looking for people just like you. This team will be tough. This team will be prepared. This team will be mentally tough. This team will be focused. I don't know if it's going to work. I hope it does, and I'm optimistic that it will. But one thing we got to get out of here is thinking that just because these guys do better jobs of communicating, that they are a little more transparent because they don't have anything to hide, because the message is clear, it's pure, there's no ego involved. Sometimes you think that means that they're soft. And I'm only saying this because I have heard that from some people. I wonder, man, everybody's so nice and there's no grown man in the room. Get out of here with that foolishness. I'm telling you right now, this team will play with toughness. They don't have to be tough in press conferences. They don't have, and see, that's the thing. In the past, you had people sticking their chest out with these popcorn muscles, being all tough in press conferences, trying to sound like they're smarter than everybody else. And their team is on the field every Sunday or Thursday night or whatever, getting their ass whooped up and down the field. I'd rather you be tough on the field and nice in the press conferences than tough in press conferences and getting your teeth kicked in and having a Jaguars fan base on Sunday night and Monday morning having just this proverbial headache that they have constantly had for most of the last 30 years. Don't get it twisted. The last thing I'll say about Boselli is this. This man loves Jacksonville, and he loves that team. And Tony would probably drink a glass of thumbtacks if it meant this team getting a Super Bowl championship and this town being and the people here being recognized for who they are and what they are. I know y'all saying, Wig, why are you kissing them so much? I'm not. I'm just making an example. I don't know if it's going to work. There's been a lot of tough people who were smart that thought that they had the answers, but they couldn't win anything. But what I am telling you is this. I think you are sadly mistaken if you think that the way that they act and conduct themselves with us, if it blinds you from actually seeing some tough decisions that they've already made, if it also blinds you from believing the words that they're going to be a physical, dominant football team, they're going to try to build this thing so that you dominate with the offensive line and the defensive line. I know y'all look like, well, Anthony Campanile sounds tough. How you think Anthony Campanile is the biggest cat in that room? No, it's the big three that I talk about. You don't hire somebody like Anthony Campanile to be a bodyguard if you ain't tough. You hire somebody like that that's outwardly tough, that displays toughness. You hire somebody like that because even though they have a different personality, they have the same goal and the same inner characteristics that you do, and you do it because you're not intimidated by them. And that's what I wanted to tell y'all. We got a big three here in Duval. Make sure you don't get it twisted. All right, make sure if you want to look, if you need to, and all of y'all need to look at the Locked On NFL Draft, because there are a lot of prospects that people wonder about, don't know about. It's easy scouting to do the first, sometimes the second round, but the latter half of day 2, as well as day 3, those are very, very important. I have said through the years that the Jaguars, Trent Baalke, one of the things that he did not do is get these day 3 people that just showed up and exceeded expectations. If you want to find out who some of those guys are, make sure you look at Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parsons and Coach Keith Sanchez. I'm Tony Wiggins, man. I appreciate y'all being here. The draft is getting closer. We'll keep talking about it. Keep this in mind about these 3 when we think about what kind of players they're going to go out and get. We'll talk to you more about it as we move forward. Thanks for spending your time here with me today on Locked On Jaguars. I appreciate you.